What is up, fellow sports card fans, wrestling card nuts, pop culture enthusiasts? It's Tom from CollectAWrestlePalooza. Welcome to the channel. If you've never been here before, we do feature 80s and 90s pop culture, all things wrestling and beyond. We tend to focus on cards. My cat's joining us for the video. That's Ivan. He's a great friend and a great enthusiast and supporter of wrestling cards as well. But I'm going to be opening up one box today, sharing some thoughts and having some fun.
CollectAWrestlePalooza. CollectAWrestlePalooza.
So before we get to the opening, I'm going to share some thoughts, touch on a couple perennial topics. First one, vintage versus modern. Something I was thinking about on my drive home today. That debate of vintage versus modern, I've heard so many folks have it on various social media channels and outlets. I'm going to share my opinion. My opinion is there's really no such thing as vintage in wrestling cards, except for maybe the 1954 Parkhurst and some of the 1970s hand-cut magazine cards. Those are vintage cards, but I don't think 1980s and 1990s wrestling cards are vintage. Hear me out. Think of baseball cards, think of, other sports cards, football cards. Cards from the 80s were overproduced. Cards from the 90s were overproduced. To me, vintage is the time back when people did not collect thinking about the objects as collectibles. That's just my definition of vintage. So whenever I sell on eBay, they ask me, is this a vintage item? And I have no idea what to put because I tend to focus on 80s and 90s collectibles. So to me, those aren't vintage. Some people think they're vintage, but that's just my opinion. If you have other thoughts, please leave a comment below. Second thing I'm going to be talking about is some exciting news. So I'm going to be featured on Wrestling with Cards and Morning again. That show is going to be coming up sometime in the future. He does what I do. He'll record something and then broadcast it weeks later. So I don't know exactly when it's going to be on the channel, but we're going to be recording it in a few weeks. Very excited for that. That was my first on-screen interview, was with him. I consider that to be one of my big breaks in just getting some exposure for my channel. And of course, Zan Morning is an OG in wrestling cards, right? I mean, he has over 1,000 subscribers now, and he's just shown that a DIY channel can get to that point, and also that wrestling cards can rule and can thrive, and that people will support it if you put stuff out there. So he's what inspired me to get into this, or at least get into it in a formal way with the social media aspect and the communication aspect. So really excited to go back on his channel. And then the third piece of big news is that I'm going to be on cardboard. I don't want to reveal too much about it because I don't know if this release has been publicized or is public yet, but one of the prominent figures in the wrestling card world is putting together a set of collectors, and I'm going to be on a card. I have seen the prototype. It looks awesome. I can't wait. It's going to be something that, of course, I want to own, and just that thought of my image on cardboard out there in the world for people to collect and own is pretty cool. I mean, it does stroke my ego a little bit, but hey, it's awesome. All these things are great. Some great news there, and that's about it. It's been a pretty good week. I did sell a card this week on my eBay store. I don't sell much. I sell maybe a card a month, maybe 2 cards a month. But for me, my eBay shop is just a way to keep this thing cycling and a way to keep it going. I don't really look to make money on it. It's hard for me because I don't buy cards in bulk. I don't buy big collections at pennies on the dollar. So, like I said, eBay, I think there's some good deals on my store. I try to charge a fair price, but, some things I will put the price that I think it's worth. Sometimes I'll put below comp. Sometimes I'll put over comps. You never know what you're going to find on the eBay store. But that also is a tip for people just starting out, particularly on eBay, is buy auctions. That's really the only time that I find really good deals on cards, or I should say, one of the only times I find really good deals on cards is in auctions. Wrestling cards is still really niche, right? So these 7-day auctions, people that are looking for that card may not even know that it's up on eBay to be sold. So I just bought a Ravishing Rick Rude 1989 Classic for 99 cents. That's a rookie card of his. It looked pretty sharp. It is raw. I was the only bidder. I think that that's at least a $3 or $4 card, maybe a $5 card, just because it's an 89 and it's a Rick Rude rookie. So there's stuff out there. If you put stuff on auction, I think that people tend to market their stuff on auction if they want to move it or they need some cash. So therefore, they might be willing to accept a lower price, particularly, like I said, in wrestling cards where there just aren't as many eyes on it. And I think a 7-day auction demands there to be a lot more eyes in order to get some momentum behind that listing. So just a tip there, look on auctions if you're looking for deals. I always have wrestling PSA 10 set up, ending soonest. I have, WWF card PSA 10, wrestling card, SGC, all these different filters that I look on eBay every once in a while. Just see what's ending and see if there's any auctions out there that no one's bidding on. So speaking of which, this is something I did pick up on eBay. It is a box. This is a mailbag video, so I should get to the opening of this. No idea what's inside. Folks that watch my channel know I let the boxes and the envelopes stack up, pick one or two at random, and open them on camera. So let's open this one up and see what's inside. Okay, so this is indeed what I thought it might be. This is a Junkyard Dog WWF LJN Wrestling Superstar Bendy mint on card. This is a figure that I owned when I was a child, so that's one reason I purchased it. Second reason is I think that this is an undervalued category for action figures right now, because this is part of the LJN series. This is actually what the big popular LJN wrestling figures were going to become. I don't know the complete history, but if you do some research, the big 8-inch hard rubber action figures, which are the most important wrestling action figures out there, arguably, were actually meant to be prototypes for getting a design to be shrunk into what they were going to put on the store shelves. I don't know if there was miscommunication or if the people that saw the big 8-inch prototypes liked those better, but that's what ended up going on the store shelves. Now, at a later date, they decided to make these Bendies, which is exactly what the LJNs were going to become, or very similar to what the LJNs were going to become. I believe originally they were going to put some wire into the arms and things like that so that they could hold poses. These ones don't really do that. I remember from my childhood, the rubber would kind of move, but it doesn't really stay put. So more of just a fun collectible, but doesn't get much love. You can buy these mint on card at very, very affordable prices. I only own a couple, but I liked this JYD one because the price and also because, like I said, it was one that I owned as a child. On the back here, I don't think this is a particularly early Bendy, because the back does show a number of figures and a number of choices on the checklist. So this would have been later on when there already were a number of figures established, but the condition is fine. I mean, with these, if you buy them raw, you're going to get ones with somewhat beat up cards, and it's always hard in the eBay pictures to see what the card looks like. But if I'm buying these for, under $40 or under $30 sometimes, or whatever that may end up being, I don't expect to get a pristine card, and this card is fine. I mean, this is about holding this in my hands again. This is about remembering that time as a child getting this and, ripping it open. It probably looked like this on the Target shelf, to be perfectly honest, or at least at that time, Kmart maybe, because these things go through some abuse in the shipping and the merchandising and all that stuff too. So hard to find them with pristine cards, and then over time the card tends to buckle and wave regardless. The other nice thing about collecting these as opposed to the LJNs is that I am attracted to mint on card versions. Reason being that I like to see what this figure looks like, what it's supposed to look like with the paint intact and, the surface and all of those things. When you get something raw, you never know if it's been touched up. You never know if it's intended to be that way, if the paint wearing off is because that is how the figure was made, etc., etc. So I like to see it in terms of how it was intended to be viewed. With cards, you don't get that so much, because when you buy a card, even if it has some damage, it's not as if someone's rubbing off paint on the card or things like that. So cards, you can get a better gauge on what it's supposed to look like. Figures, it's harder to, because they're played with. So I'm attracted to mint on card for that reason. I'm also attracted to mint on card because I think it displays better, and I like to read the cards, I like to hold the cards, and I like to feel the cards. So all of those reasons are reasons that I like the mint on card versions. But of course, with the LJNs, the mint on card versions are completely unaffordable. I used to buy them. I'd buy them for $200-300 at a time. Some of them go for $400-500, $1,000. I don't have the money, for that. And if I did have the money for that, I'd want to invest in other things anyway. I wouldn't want to drop $600 on a mint on card LJN. The other reason is the big LJNs, mint on card, they're so heavy that bubble's going to fall off eventually. So just not worth it for me to buy the WWF LJN mint on cards. I prefer the Bendies. Now, another fun fact, if you look at the back of this, there are a couple of cards that the figure didn't actually look like what is shown. And I believe the ones are Corporal Kirshner, George Steele, and perhaps Brutus Beefcake. I don't remember exactly, but if you look at George Steele in the picture, he does have some chest hair, and I'm not sure if he has chest hair on the actual figure. If you look at Corporal Kirshner, I think he has more camouflage in this picture. And Brutus Beefcake, I don't think that he was wearing that ring attire in the final version. So if folks know answers to that, again, please post a comment. But little things like that are fun too on these big cards. You can read through them and see, the history. I don't know if that Bobby Heenan looked like that, come to think of it. So fun to see the prototypes, fun to see how they posed them and how they marketed all of these figures. Offer expires March 31st, 1987, WWF Championship belt buckle. If you collect labels and send them in. And I actually have seen a belt buckle on eBay. I don't think they're incredibly sought after, but pretty neat. What an odd prize to give away to a child, right? A belt buckle. Who cares about that? Maybe it's for the dads that are buying it for their sons or daughters. They want to get the belt buckle, so they're going to buy them the Bendies and then keep the belt buckle when they buy enough of them. Maybe that was the game there. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for supporting this channel. Have some fun, stay healthy, stay fit, enjoy yourself.
CollectAWrestlePalooza. CollectAWrestlePalooza.